Welcome to the P.A.S. Report podcast. If you're tired of censorship, outraged by government abuses, and thirsty for real insights, then you're in the right place. Get ready, because here, the fight for freedom never ends. Here's your host, Professor Nick Giordano.
I'm David Zere, and we're coming to you in front of a live audience at the amazing America First Warehouse just outside of New York City. We've got a rowdy bunch in the crowd tonight. Thank you so much for coming. And we have a really special guest with us today. And I want to thank Joe the Box from the America First Warehouse and his amazing crew for giving us this venue. And I wanted to get right into this because I have a friend with us today, and you've seen him on shows on other networks, including RAV, and he's an expert on what's going on. Our campuses are under siege. Our college campus is under siege. Professor Nick Giordano, he's a professor of political science for 2 decades, and he's on the front lines warning about the collapse of the American education system. And it's timely because we've been talking to him for years, but now everything's unhinged. He's also the host of the P.A.S. Report. So go to PASreport.com podcast. And he has a background in Homeland Security and emergency management in the emergency management arena. And he comes to us with a wealth of knowledge. And Monday, you've got Dershowitz on your show, right?
I do. Alan Dershowitz is coming on to talk about the campus chaos that we've been witnessing.
Well, he can continue the conversation we're going to have. And welcome, everybody. Welcome, Nick Giordano. So, Nick, let's get right into it. All right. We have chaos. I'm a parent, put 4 kids through college, basically. Some good schools. One of them under siege, George Washington University, where my son went. Can you tell us in a nutshell why we are where we are at?
Well, we're witnessing the failure of 20 years of an education system that has bred anti-Americanism into the curriculums. And so they haven't taught the students much, right? The proficiency levels are at all-time lows. You have students that are only 13% proficient in American history, 22% in American civics. So they don't know much. And they're easily programmed. And that's what we're witnessing today. They latch on to any cause because they don't lack any real purpose. And we have to recognize that we're witnessing these mobs on the Ivy League institutions, but we're not seeing it at the community college level. We're not seeing it at the trade schools. So it's something at these Ivy League schools that are fostering this type of sentiment and ideology. And it's really disturbing. Every American should be concerned about it, whether you have kids in school, they graduated school, you don't have any children at all. The future of our nation is at stake.
So where's the disconnect, right? Is it that if you go to a trade school or a community college, chances are your parents will beat your ass if you're pulling any crap because they're sacrificing so much for you, maybe more working class? What's going on? Is there elitism leading to this?
There is a lot of elitism. So if you look at the 4-year university bubble, it's a lot of people from the same backgrounds. They may have different color skin, but they all come from the middle to upper middle class families and generally good homes, and they don't have much to worry about. Now, you go to a community college level, many of the students are working full-time, trying to go to school at the same time to better their lives. Some students have children they have to take care of. Some have elderly parents. We have adults that are returning to school after years to try and go back into the workforce.
Yeah.
So in community college, you deal with real life. In the university bubbles, it's like a progressive fairy tale.
Yeah, basket weaving, Caribbean studies, all that stuff, right?
Whiteness of Barbie.
Sure.
No,
Good.
Harry
Taylor
Styles.
Swift is a class in Texas right now. All right. So this is manifesting itself. And I always compare it to an acquaintance of mine who passed away, Rich Higgins from the National Security Council. He was head of strategic planning for the National Security Council under Trump. He was fired by McMaster for warning the world that there's a deep state against Donald Trump. And part of his position was the watermelon, which is green on the outside for the Islamic State and red in the middle for progressive leftist Marxism and cultural Marxism and communism around the globe. Can you make the connection between our colleges, the counterculture, the 50s, the 60s, the 70s, and this, pro-Hamas, pro-Palestinian? Where does that meet?
Well, when you look at the idea behind Marxism, it's all about class warfare, right? You have the working class overthrow the elite, and that's the way. However, that never worked in the United States. They weren't successful. And the reason they weren't successful is because generally people live good lives in the middle class. We have more access to goods and stuff, and we take care of our families, put food on the table, put a roof over our head. So the class warfare never worked in the United States. However, they realized that the racial warfare will work in the United States. The United States is an extremely unique country. We're the only country where we have all these different peoples from all these different places that come together to form a nation. That's why our motto is E pluribus unum, out of many comes one.
Right.
Other countries have 2,000 years of a shared history. They have shared culture, shared tradition, shared language. We have none of that. And so they recognize that the way you try and divide the United States, given our past and the differences and the conflicts between the race, is get the races, pit them against each other. And they've been successful. You know, people talk a lot about diversity, equity, inclusion today, but diversity, equity, inclusion has been built into the system over a long period of time. It's not something that's new. And that's what it does. It divides everyone into all these little groups, and then it pits the oppressor versus the oppressed, who they deem as the oppressor, victimizer versus the victim. And unfortunately, they have been successful because we're witnessing the results in real time now. Now, if you look at the Islamic part to this, look at their signs that they're protesting with. You'll see Marxist for Palestine, Democrat Socialists of America for Palestine, Queers for Palestine. All these progressive causes latch on to things that they think will draw more sympathy to their cause.
Well, we're going to get into all of that because you can't walk around Gaza saying I'm a queer for Palestine. That's for sure. Homosexuals have been beheaded over there, and but I wanted to talk about, Steve Bannon made a great movie. I went to the premiere back in like 2010 in New York City. Called Generation Zero. And it was about like post-World War II generation and what led to the financial crisis. They spoiled the kids so much. They created the hippie culture, and then they became the people that ran Wall Street, and now they're running our government. And, it's like, so it's a multi-generational thing. How much of this is the fault of the college faculty or the administrators? Where are they getting the money from? So how much of this is on them and fomenting this?
Well, every bad idea usually comes out of a university campus and then seeps out into our society. So if we go back, let's say 50 years, we all disagreed on political issues, right? That's a free society. In free societies, division is okay. People say division is bad. No. In free societies, you're going to have division. You want unity, go to North Korea. It's a lovely place this time of year. But the reality...
Great beaches.
Right? But the reality is that even with those differences of opinion on political issues, the people of the United States came together in the understanding of our history, our founding. They had a love of America. They had an appreciation for what the founding fathers did, that we recognized. We have flaws, we committed sins, but we've always worked to overcome those flaws and sins and advance as a nation. But at the same time, you have the Marxist takeover within the college campuses. Well, then you were getting a new breed where you didn't have that love and appreciation. It was being indoctrinated in the head that the United States is an evil country, that it was founded on the sin of slavery. That's the sole basis for the existence of the United States, and it's all about racism.
Yeah, CRT had its first concept in Madison, Wisconsin, right?
Well, think about what they're trying to do. If you are told from kindergarten, because it starts that early, it actually goes pre-kindergarten if you look at some of the shows that are on, but if you start at a very young age, all through college, telling people that they come from this horrible country that's based on evil, how are they ever going to be able to be loyal to that country? How do they appreciate coming from that country? And what we see on these campuses today is the bitterness and resentment that's been building up from years of this anti-American message.
And we're going to get into it, the causes of this and what groups are behind this. We're definitely going to get into that. But, the nanny state combined with sloth, entitlement, rich families.
Cowardice.
They go home, borrow the parents' $100,000 Jeep, get stoned in their friends' basements all weekend. Are they really dedicated to this cause, or are they being exploited? and by who. And also, we're going to get into, are there field marshals on the ground? Just like Secret Service agents have told me, they spot them in the airports during BLM riots. These people being flown to different cities to agitate. So what percentage of these people are paid agitators?
Well, I don't think we have a percentage on it, but we know they exist. And we know that this is not some organic movement, right? You don't flood a college campus with tents in a matter of a day or so.
Same color tents.
Same color tents, same design, and colleges that are thousands of miles away from each other. If you look at the signs, college kids are supposed to be broke, yet these signs are well-developed, laser printed, and so it's really expensive. So who is behind this? And that's a question that we'll explore. But you look at it, it's not an organic movement. It's just that they have a bunch of useful idiots they know how to exploit because these students haven't been taught anything. They don't know anything. I mean, let's be honest. How many of them ever read a book about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict? And I could assure you most of them don't. They're screaming intifada. They're screaming death to America. But that's where the danger lies.
They don't know the history, the movement that Jews, they were there before the Muslims, basically. So, all right. So I want to thank everybody for joining us, and I give a warm round of applause for Nick Giordano. And when we come back, we're going to talk about, again, how much of this movement is organic and who's behind it, who's funding it. I want to thank everybody for joining us tonight, and we'll be right back. Welcome back, everybody, to the America First Warehouse. I'm David Zere with Real America's Voice News. We want to thank Professor Nick Giordano. College campuses under siege. We're going to break it down and try to bring you the best information. Nick is a respected voice on this issue and a college professor. I wanted to get into, before we get into the terrorist aspect and what these people are really supporting, I want to talk about what are the groups that are involved with this funding, like the Pritzker family and others. Who is behind this to a large degree? What individuals, what groups?
Well, I think there should actually be a congressional investigation into this because it goes deeper than most people imagine. So we have the George Soros link groups that we know are providing some funding to this movement, provided funds to Justice for Palestine student groups that have actually been thrown off on a lot of college campuses. But then you have American nonprofit organizations, the Kellogg's Foundation, the Ford Foundation, where they provide to these groups, the Pritzker Group. Now, these aren't necessarily anti-American nonprofits that exist. These are public virtue signalers, right? They think that they want to be the moral holy warriors of the 21st century. They want to preach openness and tolerance and how they're such good people and pat themselves on the back. Meanwhile, it's kind of ironic given that Hamas is the most intolerant government on the planet. But when we examine the funding, the real thing that concerns me is the amount of foreign monies that may be behind this effort. So we know that foreign governments have infiltrated our college campuses, particularly China, for espionage purposes. There's a number of foreign students that go that are really agents of the government. We know that they have taken professors, got them on the payroll, Charles Lieber of Harvard. And so is a country like China trying to instigate this, right? I mean, it's in their interest to do so, create instability. Then you have governments like Qatar, right? Qatar is one of the biggest funders of the Ivy League institutions, providing enormous, we're talking about billions of dollars to their endowments from Qatar, from Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates. And so what's their role in it? And we need to examine the students or quote unquote students. How many of them are on foreign visas getting their bill paid by the country that they're coming from? And are they having any direct conversations with maybe the diplomats from those countries here in the United States? Is there any coordination? We don't have the answer.
Who's on the forefront of that in the United States right now? Are there any congressmen?
I haven't heard anyone really come out and speak about it. I've called for it weeks ago, and that's the thing that's concerning, that we have a House of Representatives. It is controlled by Congress, but it's not a Republicans, but it's not a Republican or Democrat issue. This becomes a national security issue.
Right.
the world sees that America is unstable right now, right? We live in a global environment where there's a lot of instability. America is weak as a nation. We're not nearly as respected as a nation. And so it's in their interest to take advantage as our power and influence are declining around the world. And it would be a smart move on the foreign government's parts when it comes to intelligence and espionage to instigate these activities to make them 10 times bigger and worse off.
Well, it's been verified that we actually have spies working in the Defense Department, pro-Iranian people as well. How much of this is, Biden wants to play both sides of the road because he's probably not in control, and they want to win Michigan and Minnesota. They're creating a terrible situation, an existential threat to Israel's existence by taking this position, not criticizing them, cutting off ammunition sales and stuff like that. Aren't they the root cause of this, and who is pressuring them to do this? Is Obama in control? What's going on?
Well, I think that's a big part of the problem, the lack of leadership. Leadership demands that you take a stand, right? So if President Biden came out in November and said, we are not going to tolerate anti-Semitism on our college campuses, we are not going to tolerate anti-Americanism, and the Biden administration came out harshly in response to college administrators not doing anything, we wouldn't be in this position today. We would probably not be seeing these protests the way we're witnessing today. And they're actually extremist movements, no longer protests. But we didn't see that. We see a president that is trying to play both sides of the issue. When you try to please everyone in politics, you please no one. But what the United States needs is statesmanship. We need someone to come out there, say, knock it off to the college administrators, get control of campus, or we're going to shut off the federal spigots, because even though these are private colleges, they still receive an enormous amount of federal funding. Yeah. If a president came out and stated, we are not going to tolerate this, it would end tomorrow. Unfortunately, he doesn't want to do it because he doesn't want to lose votes. And so he's selling out the Jewish community.
Is it Cloward Piven also?
Absolutely. But I mean, the main thing is he's selling out the Jewish community so he could get the Arab vote in Michigan, which is going to be a very close election in that state. It's a swing state. He needs that to win. And so what I think that you're going to see is he's going to continue to try and have this moral equivalency where there is no moral equivalency that exists. Hamas is a terrorist organization that slaughters innocent people.
Yeah.
Israel, we would not be in this position had Hamas not attacked on October 7th. And unfortunately, you would think that an American president wouldn't find it hard to say that, but that's what we're witnessing today.
So Biden is losing some of that support, especially in Michigan and Oregon, unaffiliated voters, right? But where do they go? Because RFK Jr. has doubled down on Israel and said Hamas should be crushed by the Israelis. Any other candidates out there? Cornel West? Or
that's who I'm thinking. Probably Cornel West, or they're just going to stay home. They're going to.
That can hurt Biden and help Trump.
It certainly can, and it's not just in a place like Michigan. I mean, you come to a state like New York. A lot of people think New York isn't in play. It's not even on the Democrats' radar screen or the Republicans' radar screen. But if you look at the overall dissatisfaction within the country, and then you factor in how all these far-left groups are now starting to turn on each other, well, maybe there's an opening. And that's the problem with the logic that the progressives have been using. Sooner or later, when you divide everyone into groups and you turn us into a tribal society, those tribes are going to get turned against each other.
Yeah, that leaves us with the Jewish vote. And, it's inexplicable. I know a lot of big funders of colleges who are Jewish have pulled funding. But where is the real Jexit? We know there's a conservative Jexit movement in the United States who support Trump, big Palm Beach crowd. And, I spent a lot of time with them. Rebecca Harari, these great people. But where is the mass Jexit, the mass Jewish movement away from the Democratic Party? I haven't seen it.
Well, I won't only say the mass Jewish movement. I would say, where are the Americans just speaking out, saying enough is enough? Like, we're tired of hearing death to America coming from Americans, spoiled, entitled brats on college campuses. We're tired of watching the American flag get burned in the streets. We're tired of our monuments being destroyed, our history being desecrated, and constantly being told that we're a horrible peoples, when the reality is there's a reason that millions of people want to come to the United States.
But we are fed up. But is the majority of the population fed up? Or are they uninformed, selfish, entitled? Is it sloth? Are they brainwashed? Are they commies? How do you, and is there enough of people like us to, affect that change?
Well, that's the million-dollar question. There will be soon. The question is, will it be too late? Unfortunately, we're distracted, right? Americans
I'm so depressing.
Well, we have difficult lives. Parents are both working. You have single-family households trying to survive. We have our little electronic devices that we're distracted with. And so a lot of people bury their heads in the sand. Oh, America could never collapse. America could
don't
never
have the
fall.
critical thinking skills anymore.
We'll never turn into an authoritarian country. And it's like I warn my students.
Yeah.
Countries can go from free societies to authoritarian societies very quickly, and we witnessed the beginnings of that with COVID. It takes a much longer time, if ever, for a country to go from an authoritarian country to a free country, and that's why Americans better wake up.
Wow. Everybody, Professor Nick Giordano, give him a round of applause. When we come back, we're going to talk about the genesis of Hezbollah, Hamas, and the real threats to the West, and a historical record of those attacks, and how do we educate our kids? And then we're going to get into solutions, right? What can we do? And
It's the most important thing,
right?
I mean, we have a crisis. The decline of America follows the decline of our education system, so we better fix it.
Well, we'll be back in just a moment, and thank you again for joining us today. Welcome back to the America First Warehouse. I'm David Zere with Real America's Voice News. You're watching a special edition of Breaking Point. We have Nick Giordano with us, professor at Suffolk Community College here, and he's an authority and an expert on constitutional issues, what's going on with our student bodies across America. And if you don't know, Nick Giordano is known for giving his freshman incoming classes the citizenship exam, and they can't pass it, can they?
No, they can. Only 6% of students can pass it, and those numbers have gone downhill for the last 18 years.
And then you give them a copy of the Soviet Constitution, and they think
it's the Russian Constitution.
Russian?
So in 1992, when the Soviet Union collapsed, they developed the Russian Constitution, and it has all modern day concepts in there: health insurance, pensions, things like that. And the students have no idea. They think they're reading the United States Constitution. The Russian Constitution starts off by "we the multinational."
And these are kids from $150,000, $200,000 a year combined income families. They're not, they definitely got decent educations in public school.
Well, no, they didn't
up.
get decent.
Well,
education.
you know
That's
what I
why
mean.
They can't pass
Right.
the citizenship exam.
Yeah.
No, it really is an embarrassment to our country. The fact that you can have this large of a student population. It's not just my students. This is throughout the country where they literally know very little. They can't name the 5 freedoms in the First Amendment. They don't know who the Speaker of the House is. They don't know who has the power to declare war. I mean, these are basic questions any naturalized citizen is going to encounter when they take that citizenship exam, and most Americans will fail it. And it's not just young Americans. It's almost all Americans. We have a problem in this country, and we don't realize that because of what the schools have done and the anti-Americanism that's festered, only 23% of those under the age of 30 believe patriotism is an important concept. And a country can't survive like that. Under the age of 30, the majority are ashamed to be American. They're not proud of America. Whereas you look at those of the older population, 60 plus, 75% say they're extremely proud of it.
But not even when I was in school 30, 40 years ago, and we knew what was going on. We understood the basics. And
think about that
history.
logically.
So it was a quick descent, right?
Well, it was. In fact, students are going through more schooling today than ever before. They also have more information at their fingertips than any previous generation that exists. So it's even more troubling knowing that they're going to school for a longer period of time and actually getting dumber. What are we paying? Why are we spending $1.4 trillion on
from
this?
Japan, I had exchange students at my house growing up, and they put it to me in Japan, They have so much, they learn so much, but they don't have the opportunities that we have in the United States. And we have all the information and we just blow it. I thought that was interesting.
Well, we do, because you see the idiocy of what's going on, right? I mean, again, you have these progressive groups that are preaching tolerance, yet they're praising Hamas. They're pro-Hamas groups.
Speaking of which, right? So Hamas, their charter in 1987 calls for the obliteration of Israel. A Sunni organization, but they also have Shiite backing now. Iran is backing both Hezbollah, which is a Shiite-funded organization formed in like 1985, and has 150,000 rockets, a 20,000-person militia basically in Lebanon, waiting to strike. It's a very serious situation. And these two groups, and the Shiites, if you remember in the 80s, our Navy diver dumped on the tarmac in Beirut, Colonel Higgins hanged on camera, CIA station chief Jim Buckley, all these incredible attacks. Our 241 Marines killed in Lebanon, our embassy bombed twice. Leon Klinghoffer, right here from Long Island, pushed off the deck of the Achille Lauro, and all these amazing things. Khobar Towers bombed by the Iranians, what don't these kids understand on these college campuses? That they want you all dead.
Well, here's the thing. Iran has now offered any student protesters free tuition to schools within Iran. And I think that the protesters should have to go to Iran and go to school now. They should learn about how the real world really works and how ugly and cruel the real world could be. Because guess what? If you saw these we did see these student protests in Iran a few years back. And what did the Iranian secret police force do? Well, they just swept people up off the ground. They arrested them. They killed them. They tortured them.
Protests in 1999, like 80 students disappeared forever. Hundreds were wounded. They threw them off balconies.
Well, that's the Iranian MO. That's the mullahs and the Guardian Council. That's what they do there because they represent a threat to the state. They feel they destabilize the state. And listen, the Iranian people, 2/3 of them are of a younger generation. They actually want closer ties to the United States. But you have this hardcore fanatical group that's been in charge ever since Ayatollah Khomeini came to power in 1979 with the Islamic Revolution.
So I developed a curriculum for the fall semester at Shiraz University here. We have pen paling with Dearborn for when our students go away over there. Campus Beatdowns 101. Drone piloting for dummies. Islamo-Nazis in you. Death to America, a complete history of post-Shah Iran, infiltrating the U.S. open border, and Hezbollah Palooza in Lebanon, where you can spend a week of terrorist activities attacking Israeli civilians. What do you think?
Is it resistance an advanced course that you would take?
That would be advanced. As David Brody on American Sunrise on Rav told me the other day, don't forget the 7-day extravaganza acting as a human shield in the Gaza.
Well, that's the amazing part. You have the
for U.S. students
here that are propping up governments like Iran, praising them because they just don't know them and were never educated on it. And that's why this problem is as bad as we see, because there are so many Americans that not only will fall for this BS, but they're also so ignorant that they don't even think, let me just go online and just do the slightest bit of research to find out that Iran is the largest state sponsor of terrorism in the world today. And listen, our borders have been infiltrated. We know Hezbollah members are here in the United States. Now, they operate on a fundraising capability. They'll do illicit activities here to raise money. They send it overseas to fund their operations. Hamas does the same thing. But if this situation gets more serious because you have the idiots here that are praising them and trying to make this into a much larger situation, can those cells be activated to conduct terror attacks? That's a serious concern that should be investigated.
Probably inevitable. So, all right, let's spend the last 3 minutes talking about solutions here. How do we fix this?
Everyone needs to get involved. All the stakeholders, education officials, teachers, administrators, parents, and the students themselves. So when we are looking at it, our education system has been broken for years. Conservatives have ignored it. Parents have ignored it, thinking that the schools were operating in good faith. We've dumbed down the standards, so we have to say enough, right? We have to start raising up standards and really introducing an American civics curriculum. Our education system, founded in 1840s by Horace Mann, wasn't necessarily based on reading, writing, and arithmetic. It was actually based on developing good citizens who understand their commitments to family, who understand the commitment to faith, to community. We've lost that. And that's part of the reason that we see 70% of black families live in single-parent household. 50 or nearly 50% of Hispanics come from single-parent households, and over 40% of whites come from single-parent households. So we have to get back to our roots and focus on this concept of American civics, because when you ask students today, and I do this all the time in my classroom, we're constantly saying what government should or shouldn't be doing. But what's our role in the system? And why weren't we ever teaching that to the student body themselves? Why do we constantly place the burdens on government? That is intentional. It's because those in charge want more and more government power. So if we make the government the end-all be-all, they'll get granted that power. But if we tell people that we as ordinary citizens have an individual obligations to take care of our families, to improve our communities without getting dictated to by the government, well, then that limits government power and it puts the power in the hands of the people. So you need a robust American curriculum. When it comes to the college campuses, you need donors to start pulling back the funding. You need the federal government to start pull back the funding. We need parents to be parents again. Stop prioritizing a million different activities from one thing to the other and start looking at what your kids are learning in the public education system. And if they're not being taught about America and American history and the concept of American exceptionalism, it's your job as a parent to give them that education. Students need to put down the damn phones, right? I used to walk into a class, they'd all be chirping away. Now I walk into class, you just see the glows of their phones reflecting off their faces.
Yeah.
They need to start engaging with each other. More importantly, they need to start reading again. Students don't read.
And Trump didn't get to get the 1776 commission underway because his term ended, right?
Correct. 1776 project would go a long way in starting to introduce that American civics curriculum into the public school system.
All right, everybody, give a round of applause for Nick Giordano, host of the P.A.S. Report. Go to PASreport.com. And great guests. You see him on all the shows on Gutfeld and Maria Bartiromo. We come back. We're going to take some Q&A from the audience. Thank you so much. Welcome back to the America First Warehouse. I'm David Zere with Real America's Voice News. We have a special edition of Breaking Point, our college campuses under siege across America, with the great Professor Nick Giordano from the P.A.S. Report. And he's also a professor at a local college here. And people rely on him for his advice all over the country, across the media. And we have a Q&A with some very special members of our audience. How are you, sir?
Good, thank you.
What's your name?
My name is Jordan. I'm from Hewlett.
And what's your question for Nick tonight?
You spoke well about the Israeli-Arab conflict and how not every student can really be informed about it or how they haven't learned about it. But what about just the basic humanity of Americans in wake of what happened on September 11th, 2001, and how similar it is to what happened on October 7th, 2023? They were both attacks perpetrated against innocent civilians by Islamic fundamentalists acting in the name of religion. And I just think about the towers burning, and I think about the people fleeing the festival while the Islamic fundamentalists were shooting at them. Where is the humanity of the students and the administrators and all the people to go out on a campus and say we are pro-Hamas or we are pro-Arab in this conflict?
Well, that's the disgrace of the whole thing. We failed after 9/11 when it comes to educating the new generation on the threats that terrorism poses, particularly Islamic terrorism against the United States. Now, my students in my world politics class, they get a whole history on the founding of Al-Qaeda and how it's morphed throughout the years and where it stands today. But if you look at it, our media has done a huge disservice. They don't cover terrorism anymore. They don't pay attention. Unless it's a direct attack on European countries or the United States, they tend to ignore it. But these groups are real. And these groups want to kill Americans. They want to kill Jews. They want to kill Europeans. And they look to replace the established world order with this caliphate, their interpretation
the Hydra,
of the faith.
The Hydra.
And it really shows you how our government they're the ones that should highlight these threats, but they're not paying attention because to them, the threats are the parents that are speaking out at school board meetings. To them, the threats are traditional Catholics. I think it shows you that when you have an entire student body or a decent number within the student body that's promoting pro-Hamas slogans, that's chanting them on the campus to the river to the sea, it shows you that we need to do a better job within the education system. So does our media, so does our government.
All right, we have 2 minutes per question, sir. What's your name?
My name is Joe. I'm from Queens. Good evening, Nick, and good evening, David.
Thank
I
you.
wanted to talk about Columbia University because we've seen that here in New York City. Congresswoman Elise Stefanik has called for the resignation of the university president. Is that what it's going to take to set all these universities right on the right track to call for the resignation of all of these presidents?
I don't want to be the bearer of bad news. However, what you have is this academic pipeline that exists. So you get rid of one college president. Well, the next person to replace them has been educated by the same system and indoctrinated and has that same group think mentality as most of the other administrators on college campuses. The way you're going to change the situation on college campuses is by hurting them where it hurts, and that's their finances. I think parents need to do a better job about looking at where they're going to be sending their children to school. They need to look into these universities, see if there's any radicalism that takes place, needs to put these universities on notice. But employers are also waking up. 45% of employers said they're doing away with 4-year degree requirements because they don't like the students that the colleges are producing.
Yeah.
The donors are pulling back their funding. I think that sooner or later, that's going to wake up the board of trustees at a lot of the universities that exist, and there's going to be forced changes. It will reform, and we're in a good position now because more and more people are speaking out against it.
And my plumber has 2 houses in the island of Grenada, so maybe a
And
vocation is good.
For Columbia University, I just want to say that custodian that slammed one of those protesters against the wall when they stormed that building, he should be the college president because he has more common sense than the administrator.
Hello, sir. What's your name? Where are you from? What's your question?
Hi, my name is Michael. I'm from Huntington. Thank you, Professor Giordano, for visiting us tonight here at the warehouse. My question is, most Americans have grown up with a Department of Education on the federal level. However, most of us also know that there's nothing in the U.S. Constitution that provides the federal government the power to be involved in education. My question to you is, how is what we're dealing with today, how much of the Department of Education is responsible for what we're dealing with in our campuses and our schools today?
Well, the Department of Education is probably one of the most useless departments that exist, but they have a lot of influence. So the 10th Amendment applies. Education is left up to the states to decide. But like a lot of the issues out there, they use government funding, federal funding as a mechanism to take over policies from states to usurp their authority. Now, states don't have to take this money, but it's like crack to them. I mean, Hunter Biden and crack, that's federal funding in state governments. That's the way it exists. And so,
That's a good analogy.
unfortunately, the states do what the federal government tells them to do. So just look at the Biden administration. A lot of funding has went to this diversity, equity, inclusion virus that we're seeing that spread out. Over 4,500 school districts across the United States have adopted 1619 Project curriculums. 1619 Project is a fraud. It's been debunked by both liberal and conservative scholars, saying that it's not a history. It's a false history that they're trying to perpetrate, and yet federal money went for them to adopt this program. I think we need to get the Department of Education out of the states. We need to get them out of the schools and ultimately abolish the Department of Education. That makes the most sense.
Sounds good. Sir, state your name. Where are you from tonight? What's your name?
My name is Lawrence Block from Forest Hills.
What's your question for Nick?
My question is this. First, just the premise that when we make comments, we have to do better at this and that. I believe that our government, our current government, and our president are working very effectively and intentionally. So as far as what we have to do with civics and so forth, that at this point isn't happening. My question is this. To my thinking, the issue that is most on everyone's mind has to do in some way related to law and order. It affects us every day. And I think about it, if at Columbia, if we had, and we did see a sign of strong policing, and it was over. So I think if we had strong policing throughout the country, this would be like cutting off at the pass, so to say. My question is that how do we focus in on an area such as law and order and actually, as a grassroots movement, make a change?
Well, I'm going to take the conversation in a different way because, yes, the police were able to squash the protests at Columbia, but we're still seeing certain pockets sprout up. We also see the cowardly college administrator shut down the campus and cancel graduation, and so that's just bowing to the mob. The problem that we're witnessing, the police could stop all these protests, and they're going to keep happening. They're going to keep popping up. And maybe it's not with the Palestinian issue. Maybe it's with a different issue. Our problem is the education system. Our education system failed. We trained the teachers of the next generation. So I went to school when there was communists as professors, but they appreciated the idea of education. They loved when I would push back against it. They loved the debate and dialogue. When they left, we had a new crop of ideologues become teachers, where they weren't subject matter experts in their field, so they substituted their ideology for the material. As we keep on dumbing down and dropping standards, well, the students today that are going for those education degrees, they're going to be the teachers of tomorrow. Standards is everything in a society. Without standards, we don't have anything. And that's the problem. We have created this perpetual cycle of diminished standards, which leads to unqualified people doing important positions. And what you're seeing is incompetence at every level on a mass level.
Interesting. Teresa, we have 1 minute and 30 seconds. What's your name? Where were you from, Teresa?
My name is Teresa Helfrich. I am from Bethpage, New York. I want to say thank you to David Zere and Professor Giordano for being here. This is a very important topic for me. I am a Moms for Liberty district lead, and I've been fighting on the front line for education and no indoctrination for a few years now. One thing I want to point out, the students that are graduating this year, they lost their graduation for high school, and now they're coming upon college graduation, and it's being taken from them. There really is, with the colleges under siege. So I am wondering if you feel there's going to be a lot of lawsuits. I do have a college-age student, but he's not a senior yet. I probably would be going out of my mind right now and suing everybody. And I also pulled out my little 2 kids to homeschool them, so I do recommend that to people who can. I know you can't. And lastly, I just want to say you can take a stand. We had a pro-Israel, anti-Hamas rally last week at Hofstra University, and I'd like to see more people stepping up. I'll come stand with you and fight. But really, my question is about the lawsuits and what you think about that coming down the pike.
Any school that charges $86,000 a year in tuition that forces their students to go remote because of protests and extremist behavior needs to sue those schools and get their money back. That's for sure. You shouldn't be spending that type of money.
And you're an advocate for homeschooling when appropriate,
well,
right?
No, I think that we have to fix the public schools, right? The majority of students are going to go through a public school system, even if you homeschool and private school students. Well, if the public school system fails, we're going to fail as a nation. So we just have to take it back.
All right, everybody. Professor Nick Giordano, host of the P.A.S. podcast. I want to thank you so much for joining us in front of our live audience tonight. I'm David Zere for Real America's Voice News, coming to you from the America First Warehouse. A special thanks to Joe the Box. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the P.A.S. Report. Don't forget to rate, share, and hit that subscribe button. That way you'll never miss an episode. For more exclusive content and updates, visit us at PASreport.com. And follow Professor Giordano on all social media platforms at P.A.S. Report.